Welcome. Today, our guest is Debra Kocis from Envision Impact. Debra, it's so good to see you. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's so good to see you.
Well, these are such interesting times. And, the last time we met, we were actually at an in-person meeting. I think that was the last in-person meeting most of us were at before we ended up being sequestered in our home. So it's good to see you virtually and spend some time with you today.
I am honored because I gathered so much from your last event that I met you at that it's so nice to talk with you again. And this is as in person as we can get these days.
Exactly. So what Deborah's talking about is in February, right before we were supposed to have a huge snowstorm, which dog-legged to the right, thank goodness. And then right before the impact of the pandemic hit, I held my Be Legendary conference, of which Deborah came and was a gracious part of that, and getting testimonials and really talking to people who were attending that. So thank you for your participation and support of the conference.
I just love the energy and everything was beautiful. I can't wait till we can be in person and you have another one, because I think everybody, I know I myself was inspired by it. So
Thank you.
great.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the next one's going to be virtual. So, we'll let you know when that one's coming up, but we'd look to do a virtual one next for sure. So, but we want to talk a little bit, having met you, Deborah, and it hasn't been that long that I actually have known you, because I know that you work with a videographer, and you and Jared are great partners, and you do a lot of really interesting stuff. And I think one of the benefits that your skill set brings is really helping entrepreneurs and small businesses and leaders help build their brand and help create a message that is enticing and engaging for folks. So tell me a little bit about your business and the name of your business and how long you've been in business and what you do, kind of in a nutshell.
Well, the name of my business is Envision Impact, because branding your business, it's your vision. I bring out what is unique about you that sets you apart from everybody else. And I'm really a conceptual designer, marketer, and I use whatever combination that's needed for your business, your industry.
Sure.
And of course now it opens up a great opportunity for people to use video. And I knew back in 2015, I started with video, different than my strategic partner, Jared, does a different kind of video.
Yeah.
But this, I knew back in 2015, it's going to surge, and it has. We've seen it grown, and you get better engagement and better retention. And so now look at where we're at now. It not only is video important, but what we're doing right now, Zooming. I was also an art director, so I love helping people with, what do you look like in this box, right?
Exactly.
And Barbara, you look beautiful, but I've seen
thank you.
professionals that, things are coming up through their head, the colors aren't right, there's so many things I can help people with, even in our box.
Right. Yeah, and I think, yes, I think that's so important. And the one thing that I will say that I even really recognized about what you did, because at the conference we had a swag bag. And when I was all said and done, I came home and I opened up the swag bag, and I'm like, what's all in the swag bag? Because, people were taking care of that. So, I was working on other things. And the one thing that I recognized right away was the swag bag, the item that you had in the swag bag. You actually had attached a small card next to your marketing piece, and you attached it, but you tied the messaging of the conference together to what you were offering. And I thought, that's brilliant. I mean, and no one else had done that. And I said, that's really brilliant of someone who's really thinking about why someone is going to be there. and then also the benefit of sharing how what I do connects to why you were there. So that was a brilliant move, Deborah. I love that.
Well, thank you so much. Messaging is so important. I've worked with writers and editors for most of my life. And what works best is when the visuals and the messaging work together in unison. It's just more impactful, right?
Sure. So
And
what are some key questions that you ask people to help them think about what their key messaging truly is?
I do a discovery questionnaire, and it's pretty long. Some of the questions are, what is it about your business to meet your goals that you haven't achieved yet? So I go very deep into, where do you want to be in 3 years? What do you think sets you apart from your competition? And so many times, Barbara, it's amazing. People will talk and they don't know, but they talk about it. And then they say something that I say, that's it.
Yeah.
And they're like, what? What's it? I'm like, that's how you're different. And it's not anywhere on their marketing at all. And I believe in very simple messaging, very clean, easy to read, get your strong points out. You don't want your message or even your marketing materials for someone to think that they're, looking at a pinball machine. You have a
Yeah.
flyer, but you don't know where to look because there's so much stuff.
Yeah.
So less is more, but organized. I went to university for graphic design. I have that background. I have the marketing and, of course, the video messaging as well.
I think that is just right on target, this whole idea of being crystal clear. Because I know even when we were putting together the Be Legendary conference, people kept saying is what it's about. And I said, well, it's about leadership. Well, there's a million things out there about leadership. There's workshops and conferences, and it's all about leadership. But it wasn't until we got down to crystallizing that this conference was about community connection and breakthrough that everything became very clear. And what I found was even the marketing, developing the marketing became very simple. It just made it so much easier for me as the conference owner. And do you find that once you find that core message with your folks that, and the light bulb goes on, that they're able to just really become really comfortable and continue with those messages then? Is that something that really helps them?
Yes, it does. And that's why I go through a lot of discovery, because we want to be on the same page. And I might give them 2 or 3 concepts, because there isn't just one way to get your message across.
Sure.
And I do, Barbara, your flyer, your marketing was beautiful. The logo, everything. And you made it unique, just like you said. There's so much about leadership out there, which is wonderful, but how do you set yourself apart? And that's what I do for my clients as well. And the clearer direction, I like to do the best one time, the first time, right? I don't want to do it over. So the more clear that we are, the better the outcome.
Absolutely. So, you also talked about, image, right? So not only having the message, but the image. How do you help folks uncover their image?
Well, it's interesting. That's a great question, because each client is different.
Mm-hmm.
I had one client who was a coach, and he was actually part of the John Maxwell team.
Oh, okay.
And I said to him, but you're different than any other coach on that team. Let's brand you. You could still be part of the John Maxwell team and have some of that branding, but we want to brand you. He had awards, he had this, he had his own experience to add to that, right? So I even helped him come up with a name for his company.
Oh, great.
So,
Great.
it just depends on what the client will let me be a participant in, right? I'm
Yeah.
their strategic partner in selling their business, in making their brand. So it was naming his company. I gave him a few choices. It was different logos to go with that. And then I went on to design his brochure. So it was really, he was so pleased. So I hope that answers your question, but
Yes, yes.
each client is different in what their needs are.
Well, I think one of the things that I find is when you look at someone's brand, like their logo or their brand statement, and you really look to see if it matches with what they do. And if there's any kind of disconnect, I'm completely like, I'm kind of done with it because if they're not sure, then as someone who might want to work with them, I'm not sure I want to work with them if they're not clear.
That's a great point. I mean, I have found myself in the same situation. Absolutely. And integrity. You want, if you come off crystal clear, a good direction, and it follows through, somehow your confidence shows through, your integrity, and so much more, right? It just follows,
Absolutely.
it gives you that expertise, that credibility.
Absolutely. So Deborah, when you're looking at, branding that people do, what is the one mistake that you find a lot of people make?
That their logo doesn't represent what they do. I have seen that. And
Really?
there are some that so on target represents what you do. Even a logo type can help. So when you don't get it, maybe it's too complex, maybe it's off target. Those are things that can go wrong with a logo
Okay.
and
So,
branding.
and branding, sure, and branding. So, what is it that you love about what you do? What is it that you love about this whole branding and imaging and creating image for people? What gets you all jazzed up about it?
Well, the first time I get jazzed up is when I'm creating and I get the chills. I'm like, oh, this is it.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
And the second time in a project I get this, oh, yeah, and the chills is when the client loves it, right?
Sure.
I've had so many clients say, I don't know how you got it from my head to a logo and to branding, but you did it. I don't know how you did it.
Sure.
So that's exciting. And then, of course, from branding goes to the brochures, the print material, the video, the website, whatever it is that they need me for, ads, social
Sure.
media.
Yeah. So how do you determine if that brand is actually being successful out with the clients or with the potential clients? How do you, what's a metric that someone can use um, to help them determine whether it's really a good brand for them?
That is an excellent question. You can test it. You can test it on Twitter, on Facebook. If a client isn't quite sure, between this one or that one, you can test it. You can ask people that you trust, this is, what do you think of this? And go ahead and do your testing that way.
Okay. Well, and then, I guess the other thing that is always really hard about branding is when do you make a determination if you need to pivot or change or upgrade or do something with your brand or with your logo? Is that ever something that you need to consider, or is it like you pick your brand and you just stick with it forever? Like, how do you think about that?
Well, if you look at even the top brands, Coca-Cola, even 31 Flavors changed
Hmm.
their branding, right? So if you look at some of the top brands, they've changed their logos and their branding. Obviously, if it's been around for a long
Mhm.
time and it needs refreshing and updating, I have a client right now that it really can use it and he's agreeing to it. So that's good. If it doesn't say the message, that maybe your business evolved. You know, sometimes we're ever changing. So if your business evolves, your branding has to do that as well. And if perhaps your business is similar, but maybe your target audience has changed.
Sure.
Maybe the messaging and the branding has to change that way for your new target market.
So it's not a one and done. It evolves along as your business evolves.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I know, there are times when there's trademark issues and someone may have used a brand or a logo for a long time, and then lo and behold, they find out somewhere along the line after they've put it on their website and designed all the marketing materials and they've sent it all out and they're like, oh, trademark infringement. What do you do for your clients to ensure that you aren't infringing on trademarks before you move forward with everything?
So if someone comes to me and they already have branding, I'll ask them, and I'm not a lawyer, but I do know trademark lawyers. So I'll
Yeah.
invite them to contact these people.
Sure.
If it's someone who wants a new logo, I'm creating it. So we're not infringing on anyone. If it's a new name, I again invite them to talk to a trademark lawyer.
Sure. So it's always good to get legal advice with some of these things if you're not sure.
Right.
Right. Okay, good. So, there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there or people who are deciding to be entrepreneurs right now, and it always seems to happen when you have, 2008 and the downturn. We had a lot of impact with the 9/11 tragedy, where people all of a sudden decided to go out on their own for either because they couldn't find a job or they said, this is it. I want to be my own boss. I don't want to be at the mercy of anyone else anymore. I want to be responsible for me. What advice and counsel do you give to someone right now who's thinking about starting their own business and thinking about branding and all that and the imaging that they're creating? What's some advice that you give them to help them think that through from scratch?
I think it's another great question. I do have a client that I'm working with that has a new idea for opening a business, and his target date was April, actually. So he's glad that it didn't happen that way.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, it was very fortunate, a blessing in disguise,
Yes.
So when he talked to me about his business, again, I was thinking, okay, how is he unique? And he did have a unique angle on his business. It was awesome. So if there's something and he did the research, okay, as a businessman, he did the research, he did the testing. So I would suggest to someone who's thinking of starting a business, if it's a niche market and you don't see it out there, still test it to see if there's any interest. And there's different ways that you could do that. And then if it is something that's pretty prevalent out there, then again, test the market, test your ideas. You have to be careful because you don't want someone to take your ideas, unfortunately.
Right.
So there is a bit of research to be done with that.
Sure. So, today, obviously, virtual is the way to go. And social media, what is it now? It used to be 7 to 8 touch points before you got someone's interest. Now it's 33, 34, 35 touch points. So we have all these social media avenues out there. What are the key social media distribution or the key social media offerings that you use that you find are the most impactful?
Another great question, Barbara. I love it. It really does depend on your industry and your target audience. Not only do you have to go where your audience is, but you try to find the groups and the niches within the different platforms.
Sure.
Sometimes there's overlap and other times there isn't. So again, some research to see, okay, where does your target audience live? What are they doing there? What keeps them up at night? What are their pain points? You know, I'm sure that many of your clients and community have heard that before, but it is a matter of where they live and what they're talking about. And the great thing is that we can find out pretty easily by going on the different channels.
Sure. Yep. And I, I do business coaching, and I always have my clients build an avatar of their ideal client. And then the next question I ask them is, where does your ideal client surf on the web? I mean, are they on Facebook? Are they on Instagram? So I think that you've hit right on target. Is who is your core client? And as I always tell them, you're not going to exclude other people, but you have to be able to market to somebody, or you're marketing to nobody. That's the biggest challenge, which I'm sure you feel with your clients as well.
Absolutely. And you might go a little bit deeper and find out, well, what are they buying? Right?
Sure.
So there's so many aspects, especially with, if you get into paid advertising, you can really get specific.
So talking about paid advertising, do you use things like Google ads or Facebook ads? Do you recommend those for folks?
I do recommend. There's Facebook ads have been great for, again, if your client lives there and breathes there. Instagram is great for other clients. YouTube is even very good.
Sure.
Google ads have been successful for some people. Again, it depends on your market. Your ad spend is definitely a consideration.
Sure. Yeah. So, and I think that a lot of people just look at those and dismiss them, but everything is an opportunity, and you just never know who you're going to connect with. You just never ever know. So it's important to explore the different avenues, even if you're not comfortable with them, maybe where your client is.
Exactly. And again, you start out by testing it small, and then you see what grows, see what works and what doesn't. And that's why I do several different ads and testing different ads at the same time, so we can see what works, what doesn't, pull away from one ad, then put more emphasis on another ad. It's really a good way to test.
Okay, so you do all of that for your clients. So you're really a full service person, full service provider for your client.
Absolutely.
So what haven't we talked about that you think is important to share with folks about branding and image and marketing?
Well, this is the first thing that comes to mind is, I know how some people say, don't worry about being perfect. It's progress. Get started. But do your homework first. Don't just jump in and say, oh, I can fix that later. And then maybe it's my publishing background. I was art director for Connor's magazine, one of their magazines. And so I'm the designer who also wordsmiths. So I do think that you don't have to be perfect, but you do need to have the right spelling, the grammar, maybe that's just my personal preference, but you still want to present yourself as professional and as great an image as you can from the beginning.
Exactly. Same advice and counsel I give to my career coaching clients is make sure your resume has no typos in it, because I tell you, I've seen more people, a manager looking at a resume and say, it's got typos in it. If they can't get this right, I don't want them on my team. And just like that. So I think you're right. Even though we are forgiving, that impression is so important. So important.
I remember when I was art director for one of the companies, I worked with Disney and Coca-Cola and some other big brands. And I'll never forget doing some research on their website. And even on Disney, I found typos. I'm like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, it does make a difference. And I think with Disney, there's so much. I think that's a company that, again, you're more forgiving with, although you kind of like tilt your head and go, why? But I think sometimes with the entrepreneur, the small business, you don't have that brand recognition yet. So you have to be even more in tune and aware of what's going on and how people are perceiving you. It's such a big consideration. So I think that's true. I think also there's tools out there. I've discovered these tools for headlines
Yes.
that give you feedback on whether it's a good headline or not. And I've actually started using these tools, and I think I can't even think of the names right now. I can post them in the comments below, but these tools have helped me design headlines for my marketing. If you put in a headline and you get a score of 40 out of 100, that's pretty bad. So you keep kind of working with it. And it's not to say that it's the be all end all, but what I have recognized is that if I have to put something out there online for myself, just something quickly, these are great tools that have made me really aware of my lack of ability in creating these marketing headlines. And by using these tools, I've really been able to upgrade in how I communicate. So it's been interesting. I think there's tools out there for us to use if we're doing something simple on your own. I mean, obviously, our core messaging, we go to someone like you who has the talent and expertise, but there's things that we put out there on a daily basis that we really need to be aware of.
One of my favorites is Headline Analyzer. I don't remember the URL right now, but I was able to help a client with so many, and he's a speaker, so many of his headlines that went from 0 or 20% that his coach had helped him with, and I got it up to some of them 75%, even 100%. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing.
Yep, that's actually the one that I used. I'm glad you said that. I couldn't think of the name of it, but that's one I use. And I've been able to bring my headlines up into the 70s and 80s. I'm like, wow. And it really gives you a good perspective on how you may be perceived, because what you think comes across really interesting or cool or intelligent may not be landing that way. And it's good to get, even if it's artificial intelligence feedback, it's still feedback, which has great data and algorithms behind it.
Absolutely. And what you said is so true. Getting back to not only headlines, but making sure that your copy is proofed and, the best it can be is that you're putting forth, that's part of your brand.
Exactly.
Right? You want to be confident that people look at you as the expert. So you want that to be there as best as it can be.
And there's great tools for that too. There's a great tool called Grammarly. And I actually use Grammarly Pro because I'm an author, and it really picks up on a lot of different things in your content. So there's great tools, and it's better than just, the word check for spellings and punctuation, where something like Grammarly Pro, again, can really make you understand and realize your tendencies towards writing. And you can change and shift and upgrade what you're doing with a little bit of knowledge.
Beautiful. I think we've helped some people here today, don't you?
I think so as well. So Debra, it's always great to spend time with you and virtually or in person. So how can people find you? What is the best way for folks to get in touch with you?
Well, thank you, Barbara. It's an honor to be here. And the name of my company is Envision Impact, ENVISION. And you can reach me at Debra, DEBRA, at envisionimpact.com. My website is envisionimpact.com. And you can see me on Facebook as well. So thank you so much.
It's always a pleasure, and thank you for sharing your knowledge with folks. And if we can help some of the business folks that are currently running their businesses, or those who are thinking about starting something new, thank you for sharing your ideas and knowledge with them, and hopefully we can help them. So Debra, you have an amazing day, and stay safe, and we'll chat soon, okay?
Thank you, and I love that sun behind you. Let's look towards the future, right?
Absolutely.
Help each other now, and then look for the future on the other side.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye now.
Bye.